Hi, thanks for tuning in today to Front Porch Conversations here at the Advent Christian Village. We are in the Harmony Center today. It's a little chilly outside the village to be on the porch, but it's not going to be a chilly time here because we have Katie Kahn, who's going to share with us about her life and all of her many things she's done. Katie, I'm so glad you could be here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Katie, would you tell our viewers where you grew up, where you were born?
I was born in West Virginia. I lived there until I was 15. I was born in Charleston, West Virginia, in the city, and when my father died, I was 11 months old, and my mom took us back to the old homestead up in Clay County, up in the mountains, and we lived on Twistabout Ridge, which is a lovely place surrounded by beauty.
But it got its name appropriately, right?
A very appropriate name. And we did not have electricity until I was 11. So I always tell people I grew up like Abe Lincoln.
And what a way to grow up.
Yeah.
Do you have siblings, or did you?
We had my mother had 7 children.
Wow.
Yes. And I was the youngest in my father's family.
And what were some of your fond memories of childhood there on Twisted Mountain?
The mossy rock at the edge of the pasture field where I could go alone and hear the birds singing and feel the breeze and look at the canopy of trees over me. That was my sanctuary.
And that memory's probably just as vivid as it was the days you were there.
Absolutely.
That's kind of what a sanctuary spot is in our lives.
Yeah.
From that point, what happened next in your life?
When I was 15, I moved to Virginia to live with my brother, whose wife was ill, and they needed me. And when I was 16, I moved to Ohio to live with my other brother because they needed me. In our families, we always helped each other. And then when I graduated from high school, my brother challenged me and said, if you save $1,000, you can go to Aurora College. And our pastor, Glennon Balzer, all the Advent Christians here will know Glennon Balzer was our pastor. He drove me to the college with his wife, and that's where life began.
And what about life beginning there was important to you? What was important? How did that cause or make you say that's where life began?
That's where I became independent. Totally, I was self-supporting and totally independent. I went to classes in the morning, and in the afternoon I worked downtown Aurora, took the bus to work, came home. And it was a full life. I was in the choir. Roger Parolini was our choir director. All the Advent Christians will know him. And it was a very full life. Yeah.
And were you there for 4 years?
No. In my junior year, I was living with a very wealthy lady. I was like a companion to a very wealthy lady, and that was wonderful. But taking care of her needs, and going to school in the morning and going in the afternoon to work, it was debilitating after a while. So when I became 21 years old, I said, I'm out of here. I ran away to Albuquerque, New Mexico, got a job, lived on Route 66, had friends from the university, and lo and behold, all of a sudden they opened a Peace Corps training program right at the University of New Mexico, a few yards from where I lived. So that's how I joined the Peace Corps while I was in Albuquerque.
And why did you choose Albuquerque?
The name, the desert. I had never been to the desert. The native people, the Hispanics, all of it. And I don't know where I learned about Albuquerque. It's just that I love words.
I know
and
you do.
the word Albuquerque.
It drew you there. Well, I think it's a wonderful start for you to tell us now about your Peace Corps experience.
Peace Corps was wonderful. It wasn't always easy, but it was always interesting, and we had such camaraderie among our groups. And we were doing community development in urban barrios. Barrio means neighborhood. and there were poor barrios. So in Bogota, I lived in a really poor barrio where the people made bricks and they worked for factories, and they had almost nothing. And I didn't know what to do because we were assigned to the health service center, but I wasn't a nurse, so what was I going to do? And the director of the health service center was like a father, watched me like a hawk. But one day I said, I'm going up into the hills. I'm going to walk up. And I did. And I met all these families with little girls that never go to school. So I said, a girls' club. We will start a girls' club. And my partner, who was a Colombian girl, we would go out and beg fabric from people. We had 2 Singer sewing machines from CARE. We were under the umbrella of CARE, the American CARE. And we got sewing machines, and the girls could sew. We would go for nature walks, and it was wonderful. That was the best part of Bogota. I had been in Bogota about 9 months, and a young girl from Boston was getting married to the mayor of Cali, and Cali was eternal spring. So they needed somebody to go down to Cali. So I got to go to Cali. I loved Bogota. It was up in the mountains, and it was cold and rainy, but I loved the people. But Cali was beautiful, eternal spring weather. And when I got to Cali, I actually had a little refrigerator and a hot plate. And we didn't have cars. I didn't even have a bicycle, but we took buses everywhere. And when my partner married the mayor, she sent a long limousine into the barrio to pick me up. And I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
I live in a barrio. You can't send a limousine for me. So we stopped that, and I would go catch the bus to a certain point, and the limo would come and get me. She went from a Peace Corps volunteer from Boston to the First Lady of Cali. She was wonderful.
And what prepared you? Did you have Spanish training, language?
During training at the University of New Mexico for 2 months, we had Spanish classes 5 hours a day. And I thought, I'll never learn this. It's not coming. But it came. It comes. And once you relax with a language and you don't worry about making mistakes, then it does come more beautifully. And then we had 2 months at the University of New Mexico. We were up at Sandia Crest, climbing trees and taking side trips to Santa Fe, learning about the political climate in Colombia and the historic. We had the history and the politics. And mainly we were taught, I feel, that the essence of it all was be flexible, be close to the people. Because community development, you're working with the junta, which is a committee in the barrio, and they run it. You do not tell them what to do. You work with them. But we were like liaison people between the poor and the Secretary of Health or the Secretary of Education. We could get them into an appointment where they could never get the appointment on their own. So I'm vacillating.
Well, that you weren't just sent there without preparation. You certainly had a lot of preparation.
We had a lot and we had another month in Puerto Rico in Outward Bound Camp. We lived up in the mountains near Arecibo. We were orienteering with backpacks across the whole island. No maps, just signs. Orienteering is where you do not have a map, but you go from this tree, and this tree will give you a clue to go to that road. But one of the girls in our group was from Puerto Rico and spoke perfect Spanish, and you could not take food, and you had to eat whatever you could find along the way. And of course, they gave us everything because our girl was from Puerto Rico. Everything turned out so beautifully, and the hills there are beautiful. And I rappelled down a dam. I can't even believe, I'm not very athletic at all, never have been. But rappelling down that dam made me feel like Superwoman.
Well, I think that still is the case, that you're Superwoman. Tell me, from South America, where did you go next?
When we left Peace Corps, 3 of us girls, one girl was going to Middlebury College in Madrid. The other girl said, let's go with her, but we won't go to school. We'll do drop-in classes at the University of Madrid, which you could do. You didn't have to take tests. You didn't have to do homework. You just dropped in when you wanted to and learned what you wanted to. So I did that, but I got a job teaching English for $16 a week, and I lived on it.
You were highly paid.
160 pesos, paid for my pension room, ate with the students, had my hair done once a week, and I lived well. I did well. Went to Toledo, loved Toledo, and went down to Costa del Sol for about a month and a half. And that was eye-opening because I loved the fishing villages, but all the foreigners were coming in, including British and Scandinavian and American, and building high-rise buildings. And it was changing the whole coastline and the feel of it. So I'm glad I remembered the fishing villages, the simple people.
The simple people. And how long were you in Spain?
In Spain, I was there a year.
What was your next adventure?
When I got back from Spain, I went to New York, and some of my Peace Corps friends said, come to Harlem, work with us. And I said, I don't think so. I'm not yet ready for big city. And then I went to Washington, D.C. to visit other friends, and one of the girls said, hey, they're starting a new Job Corps program. Have you ever thought about something like that? You'd be like a dorm mother. And I thought, a dorm mother? I'm 24 years old. I'm a kid. I would be a kid with kids. But that's exactly what I did. Went to Charleston, West Virginia to see my brother and put my suitcase in a locker at the train station, walked across the bridge, got the job, went back across the bridge, picked up my suitcase, took a taxi to my brother's, and there I was. I felt many times that everything fell. It just fell in place. But later in life, I decided that I was not in control, and accident wasn't in control. But there is one who controls and guides us and takes care of us when we jump off into the abyss. And sometimes I felt like, what am I doing? I'm in Spain. I don't have a job. I'm in Spain. And Franco was still in power.
Oh, my goodness.
So we had to be very careful about our actions. But it was good because we could hitchhike because it was a police state. And so a couple times we girls did. We hitchhiked. Sounds wild.
It does. But you're here to tell the story.
I'm here to tell the story.
And after you were doing the house mother, the dorm mother, what was next?
The next thing is I met Mo Khan. He worked at the Job Corps Center in another part of the state working with the boys. So he would bring his boys to our center in the city and we'd have dances for them. And I was off duty, but I was standing by the desk. And he brought his list over and said, go find these guys for me. And I said, find them yourself. I'm not on duty. So he was very interested because I spoke up. And that was it.
How long? From then until when did you marry?
We married right away, and we lived happily most of the time for about 54 years in marriage. Long time.
Long time. Well, I'm certainly glad I got to know him when you moved here as well.
I'm glad I got to know you too.
Tell me, that began a whole nother chapter in your life after you and Mo married.
Yeah.
What was the next?
I didn't work. I had 2 sons in 4 years, and I said, I don't want to work. I don't want to. What am I going to do? I can't be Peace Corps anymore. And I certainly didn't want to work in an office. I didn't want that. So I gave up everything and just said, I'll be the mama. So I was the mama. And when we moved to different situations, we moved a lot because he was in Park Service. And when we moved, I would always find maybe something part-time, working in a daycare center. And my favorite job in my whole life was in Northern California, in Willits, California. Small town, small lumber town, and I worked as a bilingual instructional assistant because I spoke Spanish and they needed me. And the kids, the Spanish-speaking kids, were so wonderful. They had an impact on the English-speaking kids because the Spanish-speaking kids were so kind and gentle and loving. That was the best job I ever had.
How long were you able to do that one?
About a year and a half.
When you mentioned the Park Service, would you talk a little bit more about which Park Service? And
Okay, when we were working for Job Corps, he ended up working under the umbrella of the National Park Service, but it was a Job Corps program. And he had a wonderful man from Washington, D.C. who saw potential in Mo, and he said, I want you to matriculate into the Park Service. And the way to do that is to go to the Grand Canyon with Katie and the little boy for 3 months training. It was wonderful to live at the canyon. They had apartments for us. We had a little Volkswagen Bug, and we had all of our little stuff that we needed on top of that car. We looked like whatever. And but it was wonderful. Everything we needed was there, and he got to go. He was rappelling down into a canyon in the Grand Canyon. They all said, Mo has a lot of courage. What if we slip and drop him? But he made it, and they went on a lot of trips and went to Bryce Canyon and a lot of parks, different parks. And we even went to Lake Mead, saw that park. So after that, then he was matriculating into the urban parks. It was a brand new idea. Let's take the parks to the city people. They can't go to the Grand Canyon and Yellowstone. So that's mostly where we spent time. But we did have a small time at Mammoth Cave in the Job Corps under the National Park Service. And then he retired. His last assignment was Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. We lived in Ventura County, just across the line from LA County. And that's when we decided, let's retire and go up to Willits, because he had lived in Willits when he joined the Peace Corps. And it's so interesting that in Willits, he worked for a lumber company. After he'd served in the military, he went to Willits because he had come to America, and his grandfather was a rice farmer in Willows, California. From Willows, he went into the military and went to Korea. Then when he came back, he followed some friends. Assembly of God Friends, where he had accepted Christ. And he ended up in Willits. So when we retired, he wanted to go up and build a cedar house up in the hills up above Willits, which we did. But after a year and a half, we were sitting up in the hills, and he said, what's next? And my brother called and said, could you go down to Santa Cruz, California? There's an Advent Christian campground down there, and they need a director, a manager. And Mo said, I don't think I would feel comfortable doing that, Don. You come here. You fly to San Jose, rent a car, come and see us up in Willits, and then we'll go with you and drop your car off, and we'll take you to Santa Cruz. Well, we found a little cottage on the Monterey Bay that we could afford. We didn't own the land, and it was an Advent Christian campground with an Advent Christian church there. We lived there 8 years. That's big for us.
A long stay.
A long stay. But it was good. And Mo was very involved in seeing transformation. Some of the buildings had gone down, and some of the people didn't want to invest money in it. And he said, if you don't improve it, the county can come in and condemn it and take it over. It was 5 acres near the little town of Capitola by the sea, the most beautiful little village right on the Pacific. The first condos that were ever built were built there in that little town.
Oh my goodness.
So it was lovely, and I did a women's course in California at Cabrillo College, and had many good friends, still have friends there, and miss them big time. But I wanted to go back to West Virginia. I wanted to know my history because I left as a very young girl. And that's where I wrote poetry all my life, but I wrote incessantly when I got to West Virginia. Something about the mountains, nature always brought it out of me.
And how did you and Mo get to Advent Christian Village, and when?
We had thought about St. Augustine because our youngest son, has a home base in Jacksonville and St. Augustine. He works in Abu Dhabi in the UAE, United Arab Emirates. He was at the embassy there before, and when he retired from the military, then he found a wonderful job with a big company, huge corporation. And he's loved it, and he's still there, but they have a place over in St. Augustine. Only get to see him maybe 3 or 4 times a year, but he's here. So we thought we'll try to get down to see him, be close to him, because the snows in Pennsylvania we were living, because our youngest grandson was going to Dickinson College, the first college ever established in America, 1783. And he was graduating. We stayed there for 4 years because our kids wanted us to go there and stay. So we did. Beautiful, but snow up to so deep, and beautiful snow. I miss snow, but not the working of it, and not
living in it
the
every
mess
day.
of it. So now where was I going?
You were going to tell us how you got to Advent Christian Village.
So we said we want to go and live near Mark so that he doesn't have to travel to find us, and we'll be there. And at first we thought St. Augustine, and I don't remember which hurricane came, but I saw the mattresses floating in the street in St. Augustine. I said, scratch that, Mo. We have to rethink this. And he said, okay. So we came down. Our son picked us up. It was in January. Met Karen Thomas, a cousin, distant cousin, Karen Thomas, and decided, yes, this could be a good match for us. And our son really loved it that we moved here. He just thinks this is paradise over here.
Well, Katie, we could spend hours talking about you and all your adventures, but I want to ask you something new that you've just started. What is that?
My art. I never thought I could paint. I just never even considered. But I'm in a writing group with Dottie Frassetto, and one day sitting in her home getting ready to write, I looked over and saw this beautiful painting. It was so peaceful, a sailboat on the water, small painting, beautiful. And I said, oh, Dottie, I want to paint like you. And she said, so come. So Nancy Steele and I joined, and I'm doing primitive art, but I love it.
That's wonderful.
It's wonderful. It's brought me out after Mo's passing. This has done so much to fill a void.
And I know you have another gift that I've heard you play your dulcimer.
I play my dulcimer by ear, and I'm not a musician at all, but I write my own songs. But I get very nervous when I share, as you know.
Katie, you've had a wardrobe change. Tell us about what you're wearing.
I'm wearing my Ruana from Colombia, South America. When we got to Bogota, it was very cold and rainy, and we didn't have coats. And this is what the people in our barrio wore. Only the poor wear Ruanas. They tuck their baby in this side, throw this over the baby so it's a cover for the mother, and it's a baby blanket for the baby. And we wore these all the time we were in Bogota. And I love my Ruana still.
And it's spent a lot of time with you, hasn't it?
Yes, years and years.
Well, now you're going to share some of your wonderful poetry with us. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is based on a trip up a mountain in Bogota. Monserrate. One cloudless day in Bogota, we climbed the sacred mountain. On the way up, we saw a man ascending slowly, a barefoot pilgrim doing penance on his knees. At the summit, in the cocoon of the shrine, resting in peaceful contemplation, we saw the man kneeling, wrapped in his ruana, praying. Candlelight danced on his face. His knees were wrapped in rags. His face was radiant. This would prove to be one of the most peaceful days in Bogota during our Peace Corps experience. The city lay before us. A day of excursion had turned into a blessing. Bogota in 62. Cool, what a sight.
Thank you for sharing that. And you
This
have a whole
one-
book of them, I know. But we're thankful that you're going to share another one with us today.
It's called Journey of the Heart. I did this for a Christmas poem years ago. Journey of the Heart. Love flings stardust in the face of convention, gathering grains of hope in unexpected corners, always giving more. A love that will not let the tether go, a star that glimmers in the long and lonely night. Blind men see, and love distills the anguish of the muted, broken heart. And shepherds hear the angel choir and travel to the place where love was born. Accustomed to the grandeur of the open sky, they feast on messages of hope. Peace on earth, goodwill to men, dissolves the meanest weapon here. Mercy mild, washes clean the old and angry cry of fear. Angels come and angels go, though some deny their presence here, the message still sublime and clear. A pauper king has come to lead with love, not with the law of fear. With all resolve, conviction born to open mind and heart. The wise men travel very far to the journey of the heart.
Katie, I think that that's just beautiful. And what a message for this time of year or any time of year.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being in conversation with me today.
And thank you for asking me to share this. I love to share.
And thank you for joining us today. I hope you'll tune in for another Front Porch Conversation. And again, thank you, Katie.